Just to begin with, I'd like to say hello and like to welcome everyone to a special collaborative book discussion and Q&A event hosted by International Immersion Podcast and the Viet Sisters group in the US. My name is Sean Severson, and I am the host and producer of International Immersion Podcast. And this event has been some time in the making, and I know me, Vu, and this QMI are very happy to put this together, and we put a lot of work and effort into it, and it's great to see so many people here tonight, and I'm very excited that we can all be here and do this. So for this event, we are excited to host a very special guest, as you can imagine, who has produced some very captivating literary works recently, and they have also gained rapid popularity. Specifically, the focus of tonight's discussion will be on one of her latest works, the book, The Mountain Sing. And another thing, our guests will be offering two special gifts throughout this event tonight. The first will be at just before the Q&A, and the last one will be towards the end. And then just a note for everyone for tonight's event, for the first half of the program, if you want to keep your cameras off and muted, that will be for the discussion part where we'll be talking with Ms. Kyomai about the book and providing her some questions to answer. Also, if you wouldn't mind keeping your speakers muted to prevent any unnecessary sound in the background, that would be great. And then when we do move to the Q&A session, we then welcome people to unmute themselves and then also turn their cameras on if they want to pose questions, and we'll give you some more information when we get to there. And also, as everyone is aware of, from the registration link that we sent out, this event is being recorded, but only the audio is going to be used to be uploaded to my podcast later. So if you have any questions on that, we'll gladly answer that, but that's pretty straightforward. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my other co-host this evening, Ms. Vu Du. Vu, it's great to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening, everyone, and good morning to those who are joining from Asia. We have Ms. Kyomai joining us from Jakarta, Indonesia, and we know that a few friends from Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, and in Vietnam also join us tonight. So my name is Vu Du, and I am at this event representing Viet Sisters in the US, which is a support group focusing on women happiness and empowerment. Some of my friends in the Viet Sister groups are also here tonight, so we're gonna say hi later with them, between them and Ms. Kyomai, as well as other part of the audience. So I was born and raised in Vietnam until 2015. I went to the US for my graduate education. I then met Joel, a Southern Illinois native who never been to Vietnam. So since we were together and getting married, we spent a lot of time chit chat and hang out and read books and watch media about Vietnam, so that Joel can have a chance to know more about our country, people, history, and culture. We usually have a habit, like on Friday and Saturday night, we have weekend movies night. And a lot of time we're gonna watch a Vietnam War movie. We cover a lot, like the Vietnam War by Ken Burns, Oliver Stone movie like Platoon and Heaven on Earth. But within the process, I also noticed one thing. We don't have a whole lot of movies about Vietnam in English made or created by Vietnamese. So from the moving process, we also, myself and my husband, look for books and other type of media to read and discuss about Vietnam. We got to know a few Vietnamese American author who wrote about Vietnam in English, like Miss Lily Hazlitt, and a name like Mr. Viet Thanh Nguyen, who was a Pulitzer winner, also a friend of Miss Nguyen Van Kyomai. But within that process, again, I can kind of refer to myself that when I searched for books and media, we found so many things writing about Vietnam in English, but from people come from the US or the international creative community. So when even in the US, when I talk with my friends, people can talk and they know about the things they carried written by Tim O'Brien or Born on the 4th of July by Ron Covet, but not many of them know about a Vietnamese author who writing about our Vietnam, our history, and our people. Or if they do, some of the Vietnamese American get some acclamation and reviews, but it's not as highly as other American as well as international writer. Then it came the mountain sing that make us feel so proud. I first knew Miss Gui Mai, the author, actually back in 2014 through a friend in a creative writer community in Vietnam introduced me to her, and I read a book that she wrote, From the Snow to the Sun. It is a beautiful collection of traveling stories that Gui Mai wrote through her traveling experience from country and continents. I also admire her pretty much because she was a philanthropist that cares so much about children and unfortunate people in Vietnam. She spent so much of her time dedicated to nonprofit and charitable work when she and her husband and family lived in Vietnam. I can resonate pretty much to that with her creative work and philanthropy. In October, when my husband did a biking trip across the state to raise funds for our nonprofit organization, during the day when he rode the bike in the trail, I feel like spending time driving along supporting him, but it's like I myself was riding on an emotional train as well because I spent pretty much time reading the mountain sing. This book tells story of a Vietnamese family through French colonial time, through the Great Famine in Vietnam in the 40s, through the cruel land reform set out by the communist government, which I can also relate because my maternal grandfather was a victim of this cruel policy when he lost all of his property to the communist government back then. And she also wrote about the Vietnam War. I cried and smiled so much reading the book. There was so much pain, yet so much beauty as well. There was love from one to another. There was our beautiful Vietnamese tradition. There was the courage and bravery of women living in such society and time, and the meaning of families. It's all written in a very lively yet poetic manner. So I'm so grateful for the book and the author, Ms. Nguyen Phan Quê Mai, and here she is with us tonight. So let's welcome her to give her some of the introduction and narrative about her own self and her creative journey that brought her here to us. Thank you. Chị Quê Mai.
Thank you so much, Vũ. I'm speechless. I did not know that you had read my writing in Vietnamese. I had no idea because we got to know each other when you messaged me, when you read The Mountain Sing. So I had no idea you had known me before. This is so amazing with this book because I have found so many brothers and sisters. I feel at home here in this discussion, and thank you so much, Sean, who's now my brother also. I love your introduction of the program, and thank you to both of you for many hours you have worked on putting this together and your initiative. So, Vũ said something about the missing of Vietnamese voices in literature, which has written about Vietnam. And today I read an article published on the New York Times that only 5% of all literature published in English in the United States so far has been written by writers of color. Only 5%. And you can imagine many years ago, authors of color had no chance to publish. So, my book can only be possible without Vietnamese writers who have led the way. Writers that Vũ mentioned, writers like Viet Thanh Nguyen, Ocean Vuong, Lely Hazlett, people who had fought so hard for our voices to be heard. And I also read so many books about Vietnam, but I was frustrated because I did not see own voice stories. I did not see stories written from women's perspective. And Vietnamese women in Vietnam War literature, are often seen as prostitutes, as those absent of trauma, as victims, and absent of agency. And the very popular Miss Saigon, for example, represents Kim as someone who needs to be rescued by American men. And this the reality that I experienced growing up in Vietnam. Like Vũ, I spent, most of my life in Vietnam, and I was surrounded by women who had to bear the burden of our history, and who had to become pillars for returning soldiers, who had to raise their children and keep moving forward, and had to live with the decisions that they had to make. And throughout our histories, mothers had to separate their kids. If you talk to both people who have left Vietnam, some of them actually had to make the decision of leaving children behind, or putting family members on different boats so that they could survive. And, in the book, I documented, the journey of Grandma Diệu Lan when she fled the land reform. And it is inspired by real life stories. One of my best friends told me about her grandma, that during the land reform, she had been persecuted and her family members were killed. And then she had to escape with her many children, otherwise she would be killed. So, she had no means of survival. So like in the book, she had to leave one child after another along the way. And as a mother myself, I know how difficult it was for her to make such a decision. So this book is, I'm really lucky that this book got published by, a great publisher whose whole team championed my book. And I want to share that, this book was rejected by many, many publishers. They said the story is too difficult, because there's brutality of war in there. And I did not want to censor my writing in this book. I wanted to confront the horror of war, to call for peace. And there were editors, they said, it's too hard for our readers. But but my agent is just so amazing. I have an amazing agent who really believed in this book. And when she found editors who were really interested, and then she told me, let's go with someone who really believed in your book. Because this is not a book that, this is a... So she said, let's go for Algonquin, even though they are a small publisher, because the editor is the one, all the editors who were interested in the book, they wrote me email, they asked me questions if I wrote first in Vietnamese and translated into English, or my creative process. But this editor said, I want to call you and talk to you. So she spent more than an hour on the phone with me. And after talking to her, I knew she was the right person, because I needed the right person to champion this book. Otherwise, it would be lost. So I have so much to share about this book, but I'm just grateful that it's here, and I am really grateful for your readership and your support.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. That was very captivating, and it's really neat to see, just from discussing like how your mindset of going into writing this book, and you're not wanting to shy away from, wanting to tell how things are the way they happened, and, as they say, not sugarcoat it. And I think a great quote that kind of goes with that is by one American Civil War General William Tecumseh Sherman. It means war is hell. And you have to be if you want to carry that story on, and for future generations to learn and not to make the same mistakes of the past, they need to be confronted by the horrors of that, because people don't want to repeat things that are terrible. But as time progresses, the lessons of the past continuously are forgotten, and you can see things repeat again and again and again, manifesting in new ways around the world. And clearly you can see that today in many countries, unfortunately.
Yeah, when I was growing up in Vietnam, I looked at the devastation around me. And I think I was 8 years old at that time. And I told myself the human race would not be so stupid as to wage another war on earth. I told myself, just look around me. Just look at this. Could anyone, want to wage war again? And now I know that I'm so naive, because we keep giving reasons to start another war. And the war nowadays are not about, the war nowadays is just about, using drones to drop bombs onto people. It's it's just so much horror. And I was doing some research about the statistics of bombs and of Agent Orange dropped onto Vietnam. The numbers just blew my mind away. There was so much irresponsibility there that still need to be rectified. And I don't think there is enough work done, because I Vũ mentioned about my work with the people, disadvantaged people in Vietnam. I volunteered and worked at the orphanages where there are many victims of Agent Orange are kept there, and many kids are highly disabled, and there's so little health care provided for them. And I think they are the forgotten victims of the war. I met this mother who had no means of supporting her child. Her husband had died because of Agent Orange, and her child is highly disabled, and she had no choice but to leave that child in that orphanage. And she cried to me, and she said, I don't know how I can, I'm a mother, I love my child. So yeah, and people still die in Vietnam until today because of unexploded bombs, and the world just move on. We just cause another war, and we leave a lot of things unresolved. And I don't know. And I was talking yesterday to writer Kim Thuy. I highly recommend her books, Ru, Mãn, and V. And she just wrote another book called M. So I just typed in the conversation her name, Kim Thuy, and Ru. Okay. Kim Thuy, and her novel is Ru. It's so beautiful. And this novel is about, the life of a refugee. But she and I put the Vietnamese stories on the center stage, because I feel like literature about Vietnam has put the American voices on the center stage. We are just backgrounds to the American stories, but within the Vietnamese community, there's still so many unresolved issues. Many Vietnamese who left Vietnam have not returned to Vietnam. They think they lost the country to the communists. Many Vietnamese who live inside Vietnam look at Vietnamese who fled as traitors. So we still have so much to do to bring our community together. And I wanted to write this book, for Vietnamese people, so that, because some diasporic Vietnamese told me when they first started to read this book, it's really hard because it's told in the voices of Northerners. And people who fled Vietnam are normally, Southern Vietnamese, and they did not normally look at stories from the other perspective. So with this book, I would really love for all Vietnamese to look at each other's perspective and understand our decisions and why we are here today, so that we can discuss, we can inquire further into our history, and we can come together and heal together.
Very good words, and I think very good points to be considered. And that leads us into our next point, where we can kind of explore these things, and that is some of the questions that we've prepared for tonight's event, to kind of delve into your book and kind of get into some of the deeper details on the key points. So to begin with, the first question that we have for you tonight is, this book covers nearly a century of Vietnamese history and events. So, what did you have to do in terms of research and creativity to write this book and craft the amazing personal story that you've used to present it in?
So I think I have researched for this novel my entire life, because I grew up. I was born and spent, some years of my life first in the north of Vietnam, and then I grew up in the south of Vietnam. And I have always loved to talk to people. So I have kept my diary, and I love listening to people. And then later on, I worked with a lot of disadvantaged groups. So I traveled to all parts of Vietnam. So my first type of research is like, like oral stories. I interviewed people. I mean, this book is like born out of conversations I had on rice fields, at dinner tables, in kitchens. I love to go into people's home, at acquaintances of my parents, and cook with the elderly people and talk with them. But I also did a lot of research, at the archives. I traveled to the US, to Laos, Cambodia, look a lot in Vietnam, to different, archives and museums. And I also read, I think, hundreds of, fiction and non-fiction books about Vietnam. So I wrote this book as part of my MA in creative writing, and finished as part of my my PhD. So I think research is so important, because I think the thing that made a difference for me for this book, are just the emotions when I heard the real life stories. And when I drafted this book, so I had no experience writing a novel before I started this. I was totally crazy, because one day I decided I'm going to, I was working on a novel, but it wasn't working out really well. And then one day I traveled with a friend in a car to go to self-defense class. So I asked him where he was doing the war, and he told me about the bombings of Hanoi in 1972, when he was in Hanoi, and his grandma, he was alone with his grandma in Hanoi. His parents had gone to Russia, and his grandma protected him from the bombs. And his story was so moving to me that night I came home and I wrote 2,000 words that would become the first chapter of The Mountain Sing. But after that, I interviewed like 20 people, who experienced the Hanoi bombing, so that I could fictionalize the details of their real life stories into that chapter. And so I wrote not knowing much what could happen to my characters, but my idea was to use one family to represent Vietnam, to show how that family or Vietnam was divided by our historical events, and how difficult it is to reconcile and to come together after the war. And so I also created a big family, because my intention is to use one member of a family as a witness of a historical event.
No, very good. And I think you hit it, right on, is that there's nothing like hearing a story from someone who's lived through something or been through something. There's that emotion, there's the emotion, there's just the intensity. There's nothing like it. I mean, you can watch something, you can learn about something, but unless you meet someone who's been through something, this or anything like this, there's no comparison, in my opinion. Because I've talked to veterans, and other people who've been through, conflict and other things, and it's very, it's captivating, harrowing. It's a lot of words can be used to describe what that's like.
Like, for example, one of the I interviewed so many veterans for this book. If you have read the book, there is one chapter about Uncle Doc's journey through the war, and how when the Agent Orange was sprayed onto his head, and then he peed into a handkerchief to put against his nose. And this is a story told to me by my father's friend. And this man told me many years after the war, he did not dare to have kids, because he was afraid his kids would be deformed. And he told me so many things, and I'm like, every time I went back to Ho Chi Minh City, I had to see him. So I went back a few years ago, and I asked my father to take me to his house, and my father said he died of cancer. And I really think that because of Agent Orange, and there are like millions of people who are still living with the consequences. So, in interviewing these these people, I was inspired. I felt compelled to write this book. So during my 7 years drafting this book, there were many nights I didn't sleep really. And my husband said, this book is going to kill you. But, I had no choice but to write. I felt like, there were times during the evening, during the night, when I heard my characters calling. They said, get up. Our stories cannot sleep. Get up and write. So, this is just a small part of our history. We have so many other parts that have not been documented. And we have so much to do.
Yeah, I think that is so much work that putting in the book, because if any of the people in the audience have already read that, you would feel the thickness, not the thickness of the pages, but the thickness of knowledge and story and anecdotes. Like putting in the book, there was so much. I feeling like I was reading the whole history of Vietnam in that, and many friends agree with me. Talking about that, so we know that in the book, Quê Mai, you wrote about the French colonial time in Vietnam. You wrote about the Greek farming when the communist government took over and the Vietnam War happened. There was different period in the Vietnam history painted in the book. Did you research some periods more than other? And did you have any favorite period of the Vietnam history that you wrote about or enjoyed writing about it in a book?
Researching for this book was such an impossible task, because there have been so many history books, about Vietnam, about these periods. But I think my main purpose was to listen to oral stories and discover the untold stories of our history, and to use fiction to kind of create a world of imagination. And I want to quote Ocean Vuong, and you definitely need to read Ocean Vuong on Earth We Are Gorgeous. And Ocean said, writers of colors are normally expected to be bridges that bring readers into a world of real life events. But we should be world builders, So my research set the foundation of this book. So, it's a garden. The research is the garden. I got soil for my research into the French occupation of Vietnam, the Japanese invasion, the land reform, the Great Hunger, the Vietnam War, and the war aftermath. And then, out of that garden, I grew the Chun family and the characters. To answer your question, I mean, I could not say that I think the research into all the events were really difficult, in the way that there was a lot of information, and it was more difficult to get a balanced perspective, because a lot of history books from inside Vietnam, for example, are written from the propaganda point of view. So if I were to write a book based on my research in Vietnam only, my book would be totally different. So I wanted to give a chance for the perspectives of other people. So I also interviewed a lot of people who had left Vietnam, to hear stories from different regions, different parts, and different types of people. And also, I think researching about the Vietnam War was easiest, because I still have many people who still, there are many people whom I could interview. And but I think for me, the most important was to research about the land reform and about the Great Hunger, because these two events are rarely documented in fiction about Vietnam, and they're just, devastating. The horror is just, unbelievable. So I focused a lot on these events, and it was difficult for me because these events are really emotional. My grandpa was killed because of the land reform, and my grandma had died in the Great Hunger. And you know, 3 of my family members died in the Great Hunger. My father's mother, her youngest son, and her brother. So I did not know much about the Great Hunger when I researched for this book because it's rarely mentioned. But so I interviewed a lot of witnesses, and I read books, and I asked my father, the things he could remember. And I just learned so much from writing this book. I learned about, my family history, first of all. There were so many things I did not know. And my parents did not tell me because they were difficult, and I'm thankful for learning how to become a writer so I could ask the right questions. And I think for all of you Vietnamese out there, I know many of you have had conversation with your family members, your parents, your grandparents, and I would highly encourage you to continue those conversations because our children and grandchildren need to carry the heritage of our stories so that they are not forgotten.
No, I think that's very true, and I think you bring up another great point about history, and that comes down to point of view. Whoever writes by history or teaches it or records it, it's going to have their own natural bias, or it's going to be there's so many different views to it depending on who you talk to. And having majored in history myself, I think it's very important that you reach out different sources from many different areas and different perspectives to kind of get more of an eclectic or more comprehensive view of what happened. And that leads into the next question. And this is also a question posed by one of our viewers tonight. And that, what was the hardest part in finishing The Mountain Sing, and why? And how did you overcome this obstacle?
I had so many challenges writing this book. I think the first is my English language, because I learned English from the 8th grade, and so but I wanted to write in the way that preserved the Vietnamese culture, the Vietnamese traditions, because our language had lost so much due to colonization, and had wanted to undo some of the loss. So I had to find ways to express the Vietnamese way of thinking, Vietnamese emotion in English, and in a way that it would not, sound funny to the English native speakers. So I it was like the challenge was to translate Vietnamese proverbs, and I spent months and months on it. And like Thanh Hà Lai, spent a lot of time reading, helping me. And she's a great writer whom I highly recommend. She wrote Inside Out and Back Again, a book of, it's all poetry. So she's a great poet. So like we did some charity work together in Vietnam, so that's why I said, can you help me with the proverb translation? So another person who helped me with this is Paul Christensen, who lives in Vietnam. And actually I'm working on a book of Vietnamese proverbs in English and Vietnamese, because our proverbs are just so insightful. Another challenge would be how to honor the memories of people, people who told me their personal stories in the right way in this book. And when I was editing the book, I was going through all the research I had done. There were days I had a crisis because I had stacks of material I had collected, and I was rereading, and I'm like, how am I going to fit all of this in, because when you read your research notes, you like, this should go in, all of these statistics would go in, or this incredible story should go in, because I would dishonor this person if I did not incorporate her story. But in the end, like Ocean Vuong said, I had to be the world builder. I had to leave everything behind keep it as my understanding and build a completely fictional story, so yeah, it was a very, I don't know, risky process because I felt like, on one hand, I had done so much research, so that was an advantage, but it was also a disadvantage because it's scary to look over all of these notes and say, how am I going to do the right thing, because historical fiction is a very, I don't know, tough subject. And when I started my writing career in Vietnamese, there were like many Vietnamese men who said, how can she write about this? She didn't live through the war. I mean, this is a topic of men. How can a woman who never fought in a war write about war? Like they brushed me aside. But I think anyone can write about anything with research, compassion, and empathy. So yeah, so I think the thing that helped me most was the tears I saw on people's faces when they told me their stories, the look in their eyes, and how they kept insisting that we should not forget these stories, that we should learn from mistakes from our past. And I think that the thing is we keep repeating the mistakes of our past, so that's really frustrating to me.
Yeah, great minds, Miss Andrea Nguyen, which is a celebrity that we are really honored to have here today. Just send you a message, damn those Vietnamese men critics, which is, it's funny on the side, but it's so true about real society in Vietnam. Even to millennials growing up in Vietnam like me, girls still believe that they are not, that's a great boundary for things that girls can do and things that girls cannot do. And they still have prejudice on that. Saying that, I really appreciate that you share so much advice, because in the group of guests that we have today, we have a good number of young Vietnamese who would love to become a writer later. They do have some question for you, and you just actually answer one of the question about a creative block and how to overcome that. The next question that we have from one of our audience is, which is great, turning to the reader. What do you want the readers to gain from reading this book about Vietnam and the events that have shaped it in the last century? Or are there a list of specific things that you hope people will get out of it reading it?
Before I answer your question, I want to acknowledge and say what a great fan I am to Miss Andrea Nguyen, who's here today with us. She's the ambassador of Vietnamese culture. She is the greatest cook, the greatest chef, an award-winning author of so many great books. So if you read my book, you know how important Vietnamese food is to our culture, our way of life. And I would encourage you to visit Miss Andrea's website and Instagram, because you can experience Vietnamese food in the authentic way. Vũ, could you share the website of Miss Andrea? So she has so many wonderful recipes, and her cookbook are just amazing Vietnamese food any day. So you should check out her books and also her recipes. So to answer so what was your question again? Sorry, I was so excited to talk about chị Andrea. I forgot the question.
Yeah, so the question that the one of the audience poses was, what do you want readers to gain from reading this book about Vietnam and the events that have shaped it in the last century?
I think I love the readers to gain more, to look at Vietnam not just as the Vietnam War, but look Vietnam is a country full of complex history, colorful culture, beautiful language, rich rich literary traditions, and also full of families who love each other. And I could, this book is not about Vietnam, but about seeing other people as humans, appreciating the difficult history that many of us have had to go through to be here today, to appreciate peace. And I mean, I would love for readers to do more for peace, to promote peace, so that humans love humans more. And I hope that, after reading the book, people would look at, refugees, or people from other nations who are going through war differently. One of my projects here in Indonesia has been teaching Afghan refugees, a group of Afghan refugees, how to write. And these girls, I was stunned to find out that only 15% of Afghan women know how to read and write. Only 15%. So under the Taliban regime, they are forbidden to go to school. So my students risk their lives escaping here to Indonesia, where they are stuck in limbo. They don't have access. They don't have an ID card. They can't, they can't work. So they are just waiting to be accepted by a third country. So, there have been suicides in the community. A lot of them are depressed. So I wanted to give them hope. So I started this project 2 years ago as a volunteer, and I've been working with them in putting together an anthology of their own writing. And I'm going to, I want to sell it later on and raise funds, and 100% goes to the students to help with their education opportunities. But I wanted the world to know that when we move on with our lives, there are people fighting for a chance to have a normal life, and we should not leave these people behind. There are so many refugees displaced, and they have nothing, and even hope, they have so little hope, and we need to do more to give people hope.
No, I think that's so true. I mean, there's the human element, and I think the old adage, as long as there's hope, that's what's most important. But it still does not diminish the the sorrow and the heartache that so many people go through even today. And despite the statistics are showing that the world is becoming a better place, it's still not a great place by any means, just by looking around. And that kind of leads into the next question that's been posed is, and it kind of relates to what we've discussed a little bit as well, and that is, what lessons can be taken from your book about the events that you've captured so well in this woven story, and how can this be used to aid future generations and their decision making?
Oh, I don't know. I don't want to answer that question because I don't want to teach people something. I don't think I'm able to teach people something. I just wanted to tell stories that need to be told. And I think it's up to the readers to interpret the book the way they see it. And I think when a book is out there, it has a life of its own. And I hope that any reader can relate the book to their family experiences, and if it motivates them to talk more to their elders, to reach out to one person who needs help, I think it has been enough for me already. That would be the greatest blessing. I don't have any hope for politicians to read books, because a lot of them don't read books unless they are wonderful people like Obama, right? So my dream would be, the leaders of my country to read this book, because I think a lot of the time, politicians make decisions without thinking about the impact on civilians. I was having a conversation with a Vietnam War veteran the other day, and he said, the best way to prevent war is that all the decision makers who sign a decree or who decide on a war has to send one of their children to that war. So then the person would not decide in the same way. So I was stunned to find out that, the American men who fought in the Vietnam War were normally people who were poor, because men at that time who could afford university could delay the draft, so they didn't have to go to war. So the people who fought in Vietnam were black men of the poor family, men who could not afford university. And one of the veterans told me he thought that he was fighting for a good cause because of the propaganda by the American government at that time. But also he thought if he died, the army would pay his mom some money so that she could buy a house. So I think, although I am anti-war, but I feel such compassion, towards the people who had to fight in the war, because there are just so many circumstances that made people go to war. And I think, I just want more empathy and more compassion for everyone out there. We need to look at each other's circumstances more empathetic, more compassionately, and listen to each other's stories.
I think you don't have to tell the lesson, but so many young people can learn from what you just said already.
I would agree. I think just people reading that, I think the message is very clear, and just visualizing what people went through, I think, is enough for a lot of people to say, "Oh, I never want to have to go through that myself." And that's a great comment you made about politicians. It's like, yeah, if they would have to send their children, or if they themselves had to go be the implements of their own policies, I think you would see a lot of a lot of changes.
Definitely. With that, we have so many questions still on the list, both from us and from the audience. The audience sent you quite a lot of questions, Quay Mai, to show you the love. However, we are on kind of a tight schedule, so I'm going to jump the ship and move to the next part. Now, at the beginning, Sean has already informed everyone that we are having 2 gifts from Ms. Quay Mai for the special edition of this event tonight. So we're gonna come to the very first gift, which is, I'm sure that it's gonna have so much inspirational and spiritual value. So let's see what's come next.
Yeah, so Ms. Kim, you're going, first gift, as you mentioned to us, you have a poem you would like to read to us. And you mentioned you're going to read the poem in Vietnamese, and then I'm going to read it in English.
Oh, yeah. So normally, I've been promoting my novel, but I rarely talked about my poetry book. It's called The Secret of Hoa Sen. And so I started my writing life as a poet. So let me read to you one of the poems in this book. Người làm vườn trong đại nội, tặng những người dân Huế. Tiếng sét oằn thân cây, người làm vườn miệt mài ươm từng mầm cỏ. Lũ nhấn chìm thành phố, người làm vườn miệt mài ươm từng mầm cỏ. Hoa đại trắng trên tóc ông bạc, hoa phượng đỏ bên áo ông phai, hoa sen hồng dưới bàn tay thô ráp. Những triều đại lụi tàn, người làm vườn miệt mài ươm từng mầm cỏ. Trên những triều vua đã đổ, mồ hôi người vươn lên tươi xanh.
It's very beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go ahead and now read the English translation of the poem. The poem is called "The Gardener in the Royal Citadel," and this is for the people of Hue, which is the ancient imperial capital in Vietnam, Vietnam's ancient citadel. So it proceeds as, "Thunder bends tree trunks. The gardener engrosses himself in sowing each seed of grass. Tempests sink the city. The gardener engrosses himself in sowing each seed of grass. Plumeria flowers are white around his gray hair. Flamboyant flowers red alongside his faded shirt. Lotus flowers pink under his cracked hands. Royal courts decline. The gardener engrosses himself in sowing each seed of grass. On the collapsed royal dynasties, the sweat of humans rises from their ashes."
So I wrote this poem when I saw a gardener working at the Royal Citadel in Hue, Vietnam. So then I wanted to talk about the work of the manual laborers in Vietnam. On the collapsed royal dynasties, the sweat of humans rises from their ashes. So through our history, the history of Vietnam, it's the resilience and hard work of the Vietnamese people that made us survive. And I mean, Vietnamese people are just the hardest working people on this earth. We work all the time, and we can't help but working because we have survived our past through working. Also, I just passed the link of my book, The Secret of Past Tense, to into the link in case you want to check it out, or I think your library should also have a copy.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. That was a very beautiful poem, and it has a very deep, resonating, character to it. And as you've characterized, but kind of like as things, things rise and fall, but life goes on. Countries continue, people continue on. So that leads into our next part of the event tonight, and that's going to be our Q&A session. So during this session, we're inviting people who would like to direct questions directly. You can we have three options. The first part will be you can unmute yourself, and we can turn your cameras off or on as well, and you can ask direct questions. And then we're going to have people who maybe want to write their questions in the chat. We'll be reading those out for her to answer. And then lastly, we have a preset of questions that have already been submitted that we'll be asking as well. So during this time, you can do a couple things. You can raise the thumbs up icon, or you can simply unmute yourself and state your question. And then if you want to post your question in the chat, just post a question along with your name so we can tie each question to the person.
Actually, we are in a small group, so I would love for you to, if you want, to turn on your video so we can see each other, because I feel like I'm in a family here, so surrounded by the people who love me and love the book. Oh, I just become so emotional to see some of your faces. I see Emmy here. Emmy Lê is my wonderful friend and Vietnamese sister who wrote the book Snow in Seattle, Snow in Vietnam, and she's been supporting my work since the beginning. Seen so many people here. Thank you so much for joining me. Ask your question directly. I love to. I should have gone on a great book tour and meet you and hug you, but because of this pandemic, we are stuck in our home. But I'm so grateful to see you today. Anyone wants to ask the question? Just unmute yourself.
I have a question. Since you mentioned the Agent Orange and some other sort of things that have continued from the war, we had a speaker on our campus at University of Missouri, I think a week or two ago, talking about the War Legacies Project, which is still trying to find bombs and bomblets that are buried in the ground and people that are suffering from Agent Orange effects. And I wondered if you are aware of what they are doing and how is that project going?
So actually, there are quite a few projects going on in Vietnam. So in terms of, I think there are a few areas that that have to be dealt with. So in terms of Agent Orange, there need to be a lot more work to be done on, like removing the residue of Agent Orange. For example, there are many locations in Vietnam that will use as storage facilities for Agent Orange. So, like the pollution that seeped into the ground is tremendous. So that there's a project from the American government to clean it, and it has been going okay. But I think this should be done. And there is currently a court case of an association in Vietnam who has been suing American companies who produce Agent Orange, because these companies said like these chemical was harmless. So that's why they were sprayed everywhere in Vietnam. And veterans, American veterans who fought in the war have been compensated, but Vietnamese victims have received nothing. So, so this needs to be done. One area is also to work in the area of removing unexploded ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know organizations who work in that area, and I know the organization called Veterans for Peace. They have a chapter in Vietnam, and with Americans, involved with Vietnamese in detecting these unexploded ordinances and removing them. But one other area which I would really want to see support is the area of psychological support. There has been a lot of research on PTSD and trauma in the US. I read a lot of this research, and I interview people and document the impact of PTSD and trauma on people. But in Vietnam, I only found a small research that involves, a small number of the population. And, so many people in Vietnam are traumatized. And culturally, if we're traumatized, people say that we are possessed by ghosts. So I know people who have put into mental institutions and treated like animals because they are traumatized. There are friends of mine who fought in the war who are highly traumatized. I have a friend who cannot sleep with a ceiling fan, because when he saw the ceiling fan, he would this is the American helicopters chasing me and shooting me down. So, I would love to have more help in research in PTSD, trauma, psychologists who help with victims of the Vietnam War, because there's still so much to be done in that area. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, chị Quế Mai. Can you hear me?
Hi, Hai Chiu. I want to tell you about Hai Chiu because she just started. Hai Chiu, can you paste into the chat Hai Chiu just invited me to be a judge of her essay contest to increase awareness for mental awareness for mental health. So this essay contest will highlight the stories within Vietnamese American community and what we can do to help each other overcome mental health issues. So if Hai Chiu can later paste your link into the chat group for everyone to read and to share, that would be amazing. So Hai Chiu, yes, please ask your question. Sorry.
Thank you, G, for introducing that. I think they're leading the chat. I see there's quite a few writers who just want to learn, how do you do it all? When we go to sleep, you're on social media. When we wake up in the morning in America, you're on social media. I'm thinking to myself, and I know you're on all these Zoom meetings. I'm like, does she sleep? So can you kind of walk us through like your schedule? Like, how do you find the time? Because as a mom, I'm like, I'm just now sitting down from the computer. I've been running around all day. I can barely compose a haiku, less alone like a chapter in the book. So what is your schedule like? Because you're doing this and you're doing, so how do you find that 1-2 hours just to sit down and be creative? Because I know you're writing a book now too.
I block out certain time in my day, normally, early in my morning, that I switch off social media, I switch off the internet, to be able to concentrate. And I think to write well, you need to have that moments of silence. You need to be with yourself and with your characters and not disturbed by election news or something like that. So that's a great question. I think every one of us, for our mental health, to have that kind of personal space and silence. So, I've learned throughout my writing career to be disciplined in that way, that, there are chunks of time that you just need, to be by yourself for your reading, for your writing. So I think, my UK editors, recently she wrote me, she said, oh, like you never give up, you just like work so hard. I said, I'm a fighter all my life. I'm not going to give up now, because I want, my purpose is not to be famous or sell books. I just want Vietnamese stories to be out there, because like Vũ said in the beginning, we are seldom heard. Look at the landscape of Vietnamese literature from inside Vietnam. We are nowhere to be seen. So I want to fight for this chance to tell the story, and I'm really like, I don't get tired because I love interacting with people, and it is just my great privilege to be here, because when I was little, I was told by my family not to become a writer. My parents said, don't you know what happened to writers in Vietnam? Don't go there. And my two brothers said, we are poor. Do something useful with your life. So I went on to study business. And, I only started writing when I was 33 years old. And I had to fight so much for that chance to be a writer. So I will continue to fight every day for a chance to tell Vietnamese stories, because these need to be told. And, I admire, one writer whom I admire so much is Viet Nguyen. And also, chị Andri Nguyen, who's here. We do not talk about work, but we promote other people. We promote, Viet Nguyen said, once you have been through a door, you open the door to others. We open the doors to the voices of Vietnamese people, because now I'm doing, on top of this, I'm translating a lot of Vietnamese literature as well, because, and like chị Andrea, she's like promoting Vietnamese culture. She's writing a lot of things, about Vietnamese food, but she also, worked a lot to, during the election, I think people like chị Andrea and Viet Nguyen changed the minds of so many Vietnamese Americans. And so that we went to vote. You went to vote. I couldn't vote. I wish I could have voted. But, you changed the minds of many people. And then we had a good election, so we need champions in our community. And I follow the footsteps of so many amazing people out there, and as a community, we have to do much more. We have to open doors to other people, and together we do it. And what I have always looked at the Chinese community around the world, and I admire them, because the Chinese are so good in helping others. They are successful in many areas because they help others. And Vietnamese, I think we are known for being divided than being united, so I think we need to do much more. Thank you. I hope I answered your question. More questions, please.
Does anyone would like to ask a question? We have a few questions that typing up in the chat box here.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the first question from Allison, Ali in Edwardsville, Illinois. Are you planning on writing another book? And if so, what type of book? Is it planning on being fiction, more poetry, nonfiction? So more to, what is your future plan?
I'm really excited about this book because this book also kept me sleepless. So I spent 5 years working on my second novel as part of my PhD. So I graduated from the PhD, and I just, I spent 5 years, and I just sent it to my agent, and her reaction is like, wow. So I hope it will be published soon. And so this novel is about, it fictionalizes the stories of 100,000 children who were born into the Vietnam War, who are children of American soldiers and Vietnamese women. They call Bụi đời in Vietnamese, the dust of life. Many of them were abandoned during the war, and I read a report that 98% of them haven't found their parents. So this book highlights many issues faced by those Amerasians who are the forgotten victims of the Vietnam War, and my character is a Black Amerasian. And if you're Vietnamese, you know how racist we are. So this book highlights the issues of racism from inside Vietnam. I mean, Vietnamese from America are racist, but Vietnamese from inside Vietnam are double racist. So, we are so bad. So this book is really, it brings out some of the bad things about people, I must say. And it highlights, because it's set in modern day Vietnam as well as the war. So it's set in the south of Vietnam. So the Mountain Sing is set in the north of Vietnam, and the second book is set in the south of Vietnam. And it also documents the stories of Vietnamese women who had to become prostitutes during the war and who had to abandon their kids later. So I wanted to look into these women's stories and see the reasons why they had to become prostitutes. So I also, one of the narrators of my second novel is, guess what? An American man. I had so much fun writing in the voice of an American man. Let me tell you, because American men have written in the voices of Vietnamese women all the time. So I said, why not? And so I chose to write in the voice of an American man, and he's a helicopter pilot. So I had a lot of fun researching on helicopters and writing this book. And I have had writing on helicopters, but I'm very lucky because I have great friends who are Vietnam War veterans who worked with helicopters during the war. So who are, helping me a lot. So this project kept me sleepless, but I get so excited writing about this. So yeah, I can't wait for you to read it. So later on, I will share my newsletter, and through that newsletter, you can keep updated with this news.
Sure.
So one person asked me how many outside I have. Also, I have to stand up and show you my outside. So this outside is actually a personal design of my friend, who's a great artist in Vietnam, because she loves outside. So when I went back to Vietnam, she said, "Let me design one for you." So she took me to Dong Xuân Market. If you go, I type the Dong Xuân Market. So if you go to Hanoi, you have to go to Dong Xuân Market. It's the best wholesale market, and you buy so many types of clothing, traditional Vietnamese. So she took me there. She designed this, and we bought material, and she took me to the tailor. So I have around 20 outside, but I wear this because I love these flowers. But so my husband called this Superman suit. So before I have an event, he said, do you want your help? Do you want my help with your Superman suit? Because this, you cannot put it on yourself. It's difficult because it has so many buttons. So he said, Superman suit. Yes. So somebody else asked, Vũ, what's your suggestion for women who work full-time and want to write? That's a great question. And I see stories from all of you. So if you want to be a writer, go for it. You can write the stories that only you can tell. So for women, maybe I want to ask Miss Andre Nguyen to share. Okay, she's a very famous author. What's your suggestion of women who work full-time and want to write?
Oh, Gui Mai, my God. So I just want to say that you are so impressive. This is my second time of watching you as an author. I want you all to know that she was in California a couple of years ago before her book came out, and she was a resident writer, a fellow. And I came to see her speak, and I was so impressed. I kept waiting and waiting for that damn book to come out. And finally it arrived, so I had to get a copy. Not just because it was so well received by the New York Times, but many others, but I was just so proud. And my family, my mother is from Northern Vietnam, and I got her a copy, and she was incredibly impressed. My mother is 86 years old. And so many of the things that are said in the book are not said elsewhere. And Vietnamese women are the backbone of so many households, and the fact that you're a parent or you're a career woman does not mean that you cannot do a lot of things that you want to do. Sometimes I think traditional women feel like they have to hold back because they have to play the role of a traditional woman, but someone of Gui Mai's generation. I'm 51. A lot of you are younger than I am. You don't have to go by the same playbook. And it doesn't matter where you live. You can be in Vietnam, you can be in America. You can pursue a lot of different goals. And it can be a little overwhelming at times, but you can do it and you can support other people. And I do, fuck those men. I'm sorry to use bad language, but really, I have had the worst problems with old Vietnamese men going after me by saying, không đúng, không đúng. And I'm just like, screw you.
Not right.
Right, not right. And I'm just like, who are you? You never even set foot in a kitchen. You just eat. Similarly, all the research that Gui Mai has gone through to put this book together, it's like friggin' phenomenal. As my mother said, how did she get all of those interviews? How did she get people to tell those stories and not be afraid of retribution? But if you want to be a writer, shoot, you can do it. You can write a little newsletter. You can blog. Instagram is writing. You're learning to give a hook. And if you want to be a professional writer, then you can just pitch, be patient, and just keep on writing, practice every day. Thank you. I'm going to mute myself now.
Oh, wow, this is the greatest advice. I couldn't have answered better. Thank you so much. F those men. I never say the F word before in public, but I'm saying it now. Thank you. Oh, I did not know that chị Andrea met me in the San Jose Museum, right? San Jose Arts Museum. Wow, I did not know. I had no idea. Thank you so much. Yeah, chị Andrea already said so many great things. I mean, women or men, we all have our duties in life. But I think if you want to pursue your creative interest, make space for it. because in the end, that's your personal happiness. We write to meet our duty, but I think for joy, the joy of sharing the stories with others. So I don't know about you, but for me, if I don't do creative things, I feel empty. I feel as if I haven't eaten or drunken. For me, writing books, literature, storytelling is as important as food and air. So if you practice it every day, it will become a part of your life, and it's essential for your being. So if you want to be a writer, go for it and fight for your space. And everyone faces rejections, and if people reject you, it's normal. My manuscript was rejected by many people, so keep fighting, never give up. Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. You're great. Oh, are you planning? Okay. Any other question?
Chị Mai, I have a really quick question. I know we're maybe wrapping up soon. I noticed that you move very seamlessly between Vietnamese and English, even when you use like proverbs and idioms. I just wonder like how you do that. Does it come with a lot of practice? Because I'm trying to write in Vietnamese now after having lived in the US for a while, and I'm using Google Translate because I can't remember what the words are in Vietnamese, because I haven't used it in writing in so long.
I want to salute you. I want to celebrate you in wanting to write in the Vietnamese language, because this is the best way of coming home, and building stronger roots to your heritage. So I think it comes with practice. Now you use don't use Google Translate because it can be wrong. Use the dictionary, and and have a later on and I think the more and then you should read Vietnamese literature in Vietnamese. When you read, you know the way of expression more, you become more fluent, you become more natural. So my path of becoming a writer in English is through translation. So I wrote in Vietnamese first, and I saw that world literature didn't have voices from inside Vietnam. So I spent years translating Vietnamese literature for other readers to know. And then, naturally, and I could think in English. So I think if you come to a stage where you can think in Vietnamese and not having to use the dictionary too often, that's better. So one way is to, until today, I keep a notebook of new words that I learn each day through my reading, and I read a lot. So you should, you keep a dictionary of your own dictionary, and you read a lot and you practice it every day, and it will come naturally. And thank you. I hope you keep in touch, because I want to read your writing. So, okay, thank you. Oh, I want to introduce you to Jay. Jay, can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Jay is a brother whom I found through this book. Jay's father fought in the war, and we have been, exchanging a lot of conversations, because Jay's father passed away last year, and he was highly traumatized too. And Jay, if you could share a little bit of, introduce yourself or say whatever you want to the group, please, because I want everybody to know you and what a special person you are.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming to try to put in words, but your books really touched me in very deep levels, and I'm grateful to be here. So I don't know. I put a question in the chat. I don't want to necessarily go. I mean, it could go to a really deep place, but you explained my father was in the war. He was drafted, and I noticed a couple other people in chat seems like they have connections also to the war between our countries. And I really appreciate your just championing everyone's, need to heal from that. And so thank you very much.
Jay has a question for you that he put in the chat. I'm wondering, how does it feel different for you as a writer, speaking with audience, now that you have a novel published compared to when all of your published work was poetry? Thanks, Jay. That's the question that many people in this group wanted to ask. There's rarely somebody who can walk between the lines between poetry and novel writing like Chi Wei Mai. So is it like a God's gift, or I think it's a gift from God? But what do you think?
Yeah, before I answer the question, I just want to say that how moved I am to see Jay in this in our meeting today, because my two uncles fought in the war. One uncle fought for the North Vietnamese side, and one uncle fought for the South Vietnamese side. And the uncle who fought for South Vietnam died when he was very young, and he left behind his wife who was pregnant. And my second uncle, my uncle from the North, he came home from the war, and he didn't want to share any stories with us. And I felt, I feel like I'm a child of these soldiers, So when I can reach out to a child of another veteran, it is my great honor, because it's like we have so much to discuss and help each other heal. And I'm just so privileged, Jay, that you read my book and that you are here today. The Mountain Sing is also a book of poetry, because nowadays many people don't read poetry. Unless you are as good as Ocean Vuong. So I cheated. I sneaked a lot of poetry into this book. I like, okay, this is my chance. So the proverbs are poetry, and I use a lot of images, like even the book's title. So Vietnam has such a great literary tradition. We say sách gối đầu giường, or a book that is used as a pillar for Vietnamese. Pillar, when you sleep at night, we say sách gối đầu giường, books as pillows. One of those books is Chuyện Kiều by Nguyễn Du, The Tale of Kiều by Nguyễn Du. And many Vietnamese, it's from inside Vietnam, we learn it by heart. We do fortune telling with the book. We sing lullabies from the book to put children to sleep. So, I grew up surrounded by poetry. So even though, we were poor, but we were rich in poetry. Poetry was read to us by loudspeakers. Poetry was sang to us in the form of lullabies of our moms. So that's why I wanted to infuse poetry into this novel. So I think, when I remember when I went to the US for my poetry readings. So normally poets, they just read, right? And they have questions. So I'm like, no. Normally, before I read a poem, I tell the story about a poem, and then I read it because I wanted people to know the context of the poem. So I think with the novel, I have the chance to go deeper conversations with the audience compared to my poetry. I've had so many. I think I've had about 50 different book club meetings. And to be able to dive deeper into Vietnamese history, through the conversations is most amazing. And I learned so much from the audience as well. It's not just me telling the stories, but from when I hear, from people like Miss Chị Andrea today, I learned so much from her. And yeah, so this has been such a great learning process, and I'm learning every day, and I think with all of your love and support, I need to be a better writer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the Times has been, this is such a great event where everybody has been so involved, and thank you to Mai for all the information. I think it's probably like the time for us to wrap up. We have spent an hour and a half, very valuable moments to exchange thoughts and listen to Mai about the book, The Mountain Sings. So probably we're gonna come to the wrap-up point now. Sean, do you would like to inform everyone about the second gift that Ms. Mai and Algonquin book offer?
Yes, and yeah, she's been very gracious, and she's offered a discount code that has been put in the chat. So anyone who wants to buy the book, and also if a group will buy a number of books, they will actually get a custom, I think, plaque sent as well if you place a group order in. So you can find it in the chat, and it should be posted here.
Yes. So yeah, that is such a great gift. If anybody plan to buy the Mountain Sings after this, please take advantage of the 30% discount that offered by Algonquin, her publisher. And well, that is such a good night. Thank you, Chị Mai, for spending your time and talking with us, and for all the people who join us in the audience tonight. We have way more to talk about this, but time is issue. We're gonna stay here after this if whoever want to hang out. But we also know that many other people who have already left, leaving a message that they joined the event from Washington, D.C., which is there was people that having 1 or 2 hours difference than us, and it has already been late for them over midnight. So thank you everyone for joining this. And about Mai, there's still one thing I think the audience would really care about. Wishing your family having a holiday, and your daughter is still far away.
She will come home today. Oh, before I forget, if you don't mind, let's take a group picture, because I want to, remember.
Sure, for sure.
and really also post YouTube link on Trịnh Công Sơn. Trịnh Công Sơn music is poetry. He's one of the greatest Vietnamese minds. So his songs are poetry. He's like wonderful. So Willie posted a YouTube link there that I would love you to listen to Trịnh Công Sơn song. Thank you very much. Oh, and I also posted because I love to promote more Vietnamese literature. So for you to read more, Vũ, could you post the link of Read Vietnam? So on Instagram, put together a list of recommendation of titles you may want to check out, because you've read The Mountain Sing, most of you have. Thank you. And yeah, let's take a group picture. I want to celebrate.
Yes.
This is my final event until March. So I'm really honored you are here and celebrate this with me.
Yeah, whoever is still here, please turn on your camera, and Willie, please go ahead.
I posted that song because you mentioned that your two uncles were fighting on two sides of the war.
Yes.
And that's what the song is about.
Thank you. Gia tài của mẹ. Yeah.
That's a beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yes.
Yeah, so just like a gift and a thank you and goodbye to everyone. If you can turn on your camera, we would love to have a photos of you so that Mai can keep as a beautiful memory and give to her for the holiday, as well to everyone as well. We had such a wonderful time. So there was still a few people in the audience tonight haven't got their questions sent to you, Ms. Mai. I think I'm gonna send out the questions that haven't been posted, and those that leave an email on that to Mai, so that you maybe connect you guys, so you can ask the question later and chat more. But thank you. we're gonna do a group photo. So if everybody, I'm gonna count on 3 and you give a big smile and we can capture this moment. Then that's gonna be 1, 2, 3. Yep, I think I had it. If I don't, feel free to kill me for that. But thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, I'm so happy. And we survived this year. Yeah, we survived 2020. So I wish you and your family a joyful, healthy, peaceful new year of 2021. And I hope to see you in person. And there will be no virus, so I can hug you all. I miss hugging people. Yes, so please stay well and keep pursuing your passion and yes, celebrating life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and good night to those who are in the US, and good afternoon. Have a good day for people in Asia.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, you know, I appreciate everyone coming tonight, and I'm really glad we were able to do this collaborative event tonight. And this event will be posted on my podcast, International Immersion. And I'm also I'm honored to have this along with, and the premise of my podcast, as I was talking to Ms. Kim Mai and to Vu, is having lived overseas and traveled a lot, the goal is to create a platform where people can share stories. They can learn about each other. They can learn about places. And this event tonight has just been a wonderful example of that. And it's my goal, as you know, for more and more people to be connected with the wider world around them. And at the end of the day, there's, you know, we're all human. We all share basic things, desires, and drives. So, you know, it's my goal to continue to build that and work with wonderful people like Ms. Kimai and Ms. Vu and other people. And I'm always looking for stories and people to interview or discuss with, because I think that in this day and age, we need, even though the world is becoming more interconnected, we still need to become much more interwoven to understand each other and realize that, you know, and as we've, you know, very vividly described tonight, we don't want a lot of things that have happened in the past to be repeated. And I think the best way for that is through education, you know, exchange of ideas and traveling and learning about people all around the world. And I think if everyone, every child, every student would go overseas or travel or just spend time outside of their comfort zone, that would be a huge step in that direction.
Thank you so much, Sean and Vu, for your great work today. I'm grateful to each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Oh, hello, Kat. There's a cat.
Yes, so we will plan to send out the podcast to everybody who registered to the event as well after this. But thank you so much, everyone. Whoever still wants to hang out with Chi Quay Mai, I think you have a tight schedule to move on after this. So please feel free to leave.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, for coming to see me. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Good to see you, Jay. The first time I meet you in person. Thank you for joining.
Great to see you. Good night. Thank you. Great to see everyone. Thanks for the event.
Yep.
It must be late where you are, right? What time is it now?
Where I am? 10 past 10, same as the hosts, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
We are in St. Louis, Missouri, so it's Central Time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. I actually grew up there. I was telling Quinn my so small world.
Yeah, Sean and I were from here. Anyhow, thank you, everyone. I'm gonna officially end the meeting for here, so Quay Mai can move on with her busy Saturday, and hope you have a good holiday after this.
Thank you so much, everyone. Stephanie, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Perfect event.